Thanks, guys. Thank you, Jessica, for organizing this. I always love coming to these events simply because I get a different level of students that come to these to listen. The questions I get typically, from the dating community is like, oh man, JT, how do I get a girlfriend? How do I ask her out? But when I go to a university, okay, whether it's Yale, Harvard, or here, I get questions that have more to do with, how does the media's role affect an Asian man's confidence? Does it affect it? What about the, gender imbalance? These higher level kind of top-down issues that affect us as Asian Americans, and specifically because I, specialize in dating coaching for men, how does it affect Asian American men? So Jessica asked me to do a 3-part presentation. The first part is going to be, higher level. Has to do with paper tigers, all right, or, dealing with that. Who read that New York Magazine article, Paper Tigers? Quite a few of you, okay. I know in some schools they're teaching it now in some of the Asian American studies. And in that, it addressed a lot of different issues. Some of it that will affect you and some of it that will, quite frankly, not affect any of you, right? The other part will, Valentine's Day is coming up. So we'll talk a little bit about dating, some dating tips for you guys. And then finally, a general discussion, Q&A, all right? I know some of you guys have a lot of questions about what I do, about the community that I serve. Some of it, you're generally curious. Some of it simply that you have certain preconceptions that may, be correct or maybe, not correct. So without further ado, let's talk about the first topic. Now, last year, there were a couple interesting things that happened in the Asian American community, the blogosphere, if you will, all right, that garnered a lot of mainstream attention that, generally speaking, we don't receive. Like, for example, the Tiger Mom, right? Everybody heard of the Tiger Mom? Yeah? Who was raised by the Tiger Mom? I was. I got spanked if I got a B. Shoot. So quite a few of you. All right? Now, it seems like a joke to those of us who aren't Asian or who weren't raised in that environment, but quite a few of us were, And it's just not Tiger Moms. Just today, when I landed and went into my hotel room, turned on CNN, there's a new phenomenon, apparently. It's breaking news on CNN. It's called the Eagle Dad. You guys see this yet? This guy took his 4-year-old son, who was crying, and made him run through the snow, basically naked, to make him stronger. This wasn't in China. This was in New York. All right? So it's just not Tiger Moms. It's like Eagle Dads. All right? And I had an Eagle Dad, too. All right? At one point, I literally, I was 3rd grade or something like that. I was just scared, completely spitless, that I had this B. Was it? No, it was like a B or something. So I forged it. And I tried to turn it into an A, right? My dad figured it out, and he took a belt and whooped me, right? I don't know if that happens to you guys, but I know these kind of punishments, whether it's just verbal or physical, happen to a lot of people, right? Another kind of event that made the news was the Asian Like Me, the Paper Tigers, which quite a few of you read, right? Now, this doesn't apply to everybody. The things that he described in Paper Tigers doesn't, apply to everybody, but it applies to a significant enough amount that it matters. All right? I know a lot of people read it and it's this is male-centric. And it is. It is. It is completely male-centric. All right? It's a lot of angst. It goes on for 20 pages. It took me a really long time to actually get through it. But here's the interesting thing, right? At what point in any kind of national magazine or newspaper would give an Asian American that much space in a magazine for him to basically just go all angst-ridden? Wesley fulfilled his 1-year contract with this one article. All right? One article, boom. He was done for the entire year when it came to writing. All right? Now, another interesting thing is a lot of Asians who read this, I heard this, I get emailed by some of my Asian friends, and they're like, oh man, why is Wesley writing that? It makes us look bad, right? Who thought that? Anybody think that? It's just making us look bad? Nobody? Yeah? Yeah. The entire idea of saving face, a lot of my friends, a lot of the emails I read were about that. But here's the interesting thing. About a month after this came out, it was about May, I was in New York teaching, and I was being followed by Nightline, and they were following me, and they were on a program and everything like that. And, I'm taking a moment of rest. I go to the bar, grab something to eat. And as I'm sitting, there's this old white guy. He's 70 years old, right? And he's staring at me, which is kind of weird, right? Imagine a 70-year-old guy just standing right there, and he's just looking at you. And the thing is, I get recognized. And I remember I'm out in LA, New York, I get recognized almost every single night. Usually just by Asian guys, occasionally by white guys, but never women, unfortunately. But it's a 70-year-old guy? No. So he comes up to me as I'm eating, he says, young man. I'm 34, he calls me a young man, right? And it's were you on a newspaper, front of a magazine? It's yeah, that was me. Did you read that New York magazine? It's yeah, I was, I'm a retiree from Florida, right? And I get that delivered to my door. And, I picked it up, and this is the retiree from Florida saying this. And the first thing I thought was, oh, more successful Asian Americans getting good grades, getting great jobs. Why the hell do I want to read about successful Asian Americans? Right? That was his perception. It's interesting. It's very kind of flat, two-dimensional. Then he opens to the front page. And it talks all about the issues that, Wesley waxes very angsty and very eloquently about. And his second thought was, wow, this is interesting. There's more to Asians than the archetype of successful, Ivy League, educated, overachieving. There's depth. There are problems that we have to face. So, again, a lot of people, they believe, and rightfully so, that this, what I'm talking about, does not face, it's not something that every Asian American or every man has to deal with. But enough of us do, all right, have to deal with this. It's a significant portion. I'm going to explain why. Now, does the bamboo ceiling exist? And if it does, is it imposed upon us by a privileged class? Or is it self-imposed of our own doing? All right. So this is, just get a little background. This is me. All right. I was very, very much like you guys. I was very driven to be successful. I wanted to be, an astronaut. So I decided I'd be an aerospace engineer. I went to Florida Institute of Technology and basically busted my ass and to go into, basically working for defense contractors for NASA and the Air Force. And so I'm trained to solve problems, right? At the age of 24, my title was a senior spacecraft systems engineer. I was talking to somebody from the CIA, about getting secret clearance. SSBI, I worked at NASA, it was great, Air Force projects. So what I do for them and what I do for dating is I break down very complex problems. I break them down to simple, understandable, actionable steps. They're not always nice. They're not always easy. Quite frankly, most of the time, they're not politically correct. But they are effective and results-oriented. All right? Again, I'm an engineer. That's how I was trained. I think very logically. I think very linearly. So my introduction to corporate America. This is what's going to happen to you guys pretty soon. Who here is about to graduate? All right? It's going to be interesting for some of you guys. So I was all bushy-eyed and bright-eyed and ready to go into corporate America. Right? I had trained to do all these kind of job interviewing skills. And so I finally land my first job. And it's great. Making good money, started living near the beach, had a Mercedes. And I busted my ass. And I got like this $10,000 check from the company for doing so well, for getting a spacecraft through like payload testing so fast. Right? $10,000 check. I'm like, yeah, this is nice. I'm the man. Right? I know what I'm doing. My boss recognizes me. Then a couple months later, someone who had come in at the same time got promoted 4 levels higher. All right? It ended up that she had befriended not only like the department head, but ended up started dating the boss. All right? It blew my mind. It blew a lot of our minds how like apparent that was. And just that scale of achievement so rapidly, based not upon merit, but upon politics, upon social relationships. And one of the things that Wesley talked about in Paper Tigers is the lack of a lot of Asian Americans when it comes to social intelligence. Everything okay up there? Is it red? Yeah. Okay. So, Asian Week did this study, or the quoted study, that showed that Asians represent 23% of the Bay Area. Only 9.3% are executives, and only 5.5% are board members. You go to Silicon Valley, 30% of the Asian population of the computer programmers, while only 9.7% are on the executive board. That includes all minorities. Obviously, you see a overrepresentation of the rank and file engineering occupation, the line workers, but not necessarily in the leadership class, if you will. All right. Now again, is this a bamboo ceiling? Is this, something that someone is doing to us, or are we doing it to ourselves?